Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for attending our first official episode in our webinar series, where we will be exploring the intersection between innovation in the workplace and emerging technologies, and how these two seemingly unrelated topics really go hand in hand in not only changing how we work for the better, but also reimagining how we think about work in the conventional sense. My name is Dante Dardane, and I am the Senior Sales Representative at GlobalDWS. And I'm joined today with Jessica Nelson, who is our Technical Marketing Analyst, and we are very happy to be your host for our first episode. So we hope you enjoy the presentation and hopefully learn something new in the process. So before we jump into the presentation, I just want to go over some really quick housekeeping rules. So first, we are expecting the webinar episode to last for about 30 minutes. And all dial-in participants will be muted just so that Jessica and I can present without any interruptions. And after the webinar has been completed, you'll be able to access the on-demand video on either our YouTube page, which is at GlobalDWS, or our website, which is globaldws.com. So for today's agenda, we are going to be sharing with you some background information about our company and who we are and what we do. We're also going to provide you with some context in regards to today's business landscape and why there is such a need in today's economy for new ways to innovate the workplace. We're also going to share some information about our framework and methodology for how we go about developing and integrating our solutions. And we're going to share some specific examples of emerging technology that exists and how it's being used to revolutionize some industries. And at the very end, we're going to close with some of our final thoughts and just tie in everything that we discussed and just go over the main points with you again. So GlobalDWS is a systems integrator and a solutions provider, which means that not only do we develop customized solutions to address our clients' business challenges, but we also work with our clients and in most times their IT departments on how best to integrate these customized solutions into their businesses, which could be their operations or just their business practices. And once the solution has been developed and integrated, we continue to work with our clients to not only track the succession of the deployments of the solution and also how it's being used, but we also work with our clients to figure out new ways to innovate our solutions as their business needs continue to change and as the economy continues to change overall.
So now I'm going to provide a little bit of context in like sort of business landscape that we find ourselves in today. So today's world is, to say the least, a little bit different than the one we encountered 5-10 years ago. Since the middle of the last century, we've been immersed in the fourth industrial revolution, which continues to increase the rate at which traditional legacy manufacturing and industrial practices are becoming automated using modern, more smart technologies. In the last 10 years, we've really seen a shift in automation beyond industrial markets. It's not just robotic arms making cars in factories anymore, but we're really starting to become immersed in the world of automating more close to home processes like turning down the thermostat or auto-filling data sheets. So right now, service robots for professional use are experiencing a technological revolution. Now we are looking to automate tasks that are meant to augment the human experience. And what I mean by that is augmenting those tasks that are mundane, repetitive, predictable, and or dangerous. So if any of those adjectives resonates with you and your job experience, the reality is that your job will likely become automated to some extent in the next 20 years. Those jobs and tasks that are on the opposite side of the spectrum, so those that are highly specialized or demand a high quality of human interaction or attention to social nuances, it's fair to say that those will not be automated anytime in the near future. There is, as I'm sure everyone is aware, a significant concern in our society today that, robot will replace me or robot will take my job. As someone in the automation industry, I always think about how much retaliation there was, for example, when the conveyor belt was introduced in the early 20th century. and how resistant workers were to this change. However, automation and AI now, it's always premised on the concept of augmenting the human working experience, and ultimately to empower people to pursue and take part in work that is meaningful and engaging. So in that sense, we can see automation as really an assistive technology, an assistive capability that looks to put a higher premium on human labor and really prioritizes that incomparable quality of work that humans are able to produce.
So I think it's good just to spend a few minutes talking about this age-old question, which is, does job automation equal job loss? And for my own research, the answer is no. And I found this really interesting graph that I pulled from a presentation from a lady named Mary Lassity, who works at MIT. And what she did in her research was interview about 100 companies that successfully deployed a automation tool within their organization. And she asked them, how did they respond to the excess labor capacity that emerged after they implemented this automation tool that automated some percentage of some of their employees' jobs. And if you look at the graph, you can see that the most common response that these organizations had to the excess labor capacity was to reallocate that excess labor into different areas in the business rather than laying off the employees. And I think one of the reasons why, this misconception has grown to what it is today is because a lot of companies and managers are uncertain about how to respond to this excess labor that emerges after they deploy the automation tool, or maybe it's not really something that they think about. But when you're looking at choosing the right solutions provider and integrator, you also want to think of someone that, or a company that is able to help with the organizational change management, which means looking at how these new technologies and automation tools are not only going to function within an organization, but also asking yourself as a manager or an executive, how is this new technology going to impact the way my employees work? And think about how we can respond to those changes, which in this case is an excess in labor capacity. So one thing that we really think about at GlobalDWS when we're advising our clients on how to integrate solutions or how solutions should be developed is also looking at how these solutions are going to impact their workforce and helping them to find ways to respond to those changes and impacts that don't always result in a job loss. And as you can see, there are many different ways that a company can respond to that. So now we're going to take a look at emerging technologies that are transforming the way we work. So the first technology we're going to talk about are service robots. And the main reason why service robots are trending in different industries is because people are starting to realize that there are a lot of inefficiencies in the way we work and the way work gets done. And more specifically, there are a lot of jobs that are either very dangerous or very repetitive that it would be better for a robot to do than a human. And as we get more service robots into the workplace, we can begin to shift the human labor force from doing less of the repetitive work and move them over to the more meaningful work. So when we go through this slide very quickly, we see that there are many different industries that all can benefit from service robots. And just to pick out one that I think is a huge area of focus today is the healthcare industry. And the challenge that is being faced by healthcare professionals is how can we continue to maintain the same level of hygiene and cleanliness while reducing the number of face-to-face interactions between healthcare staff and their patients. So one way that service robots can play a huge role in helping healthcare professionals to address this challenge are telepresence robots. So what a telepresence robot is a robot similar to the one that you see on the screen here with a small tablet screen in front of them that allows the healthcare professionals to conduct virtual appointments with patients that either have an infectious disease or for some reason are unable to conduct the appointments in person. So when you have a telepresence robot that's able to autonomously navigate into the patient's room, have the appointments appear on the screen, and the doctor or the nurse or the healthcare professional is at home, they can conduct the interview remotely without endangering the safety of themselves or the patient. See, all the different types of service robots. These aren't all the ones that exist, but these are a few that we either use ourselves or that you've probably seen in different workplaces. And one thing that really stands out to me is that, there are that service robots can vary so drastically in terms of their appearance. And the main reason for that is depending on what the task that you want the robot to perform, it may need to be a bit taller. So like the telepresence robot, it wouldn't work if the robot was, as short as the Nano. But then there are times where you'll need a service robot in classrooms with young children, for example. And in that case, it doesn't really make sense to have a very tall robot like the Amy or the Max. So when you think of hardware, it's very important that the design of the robot meets your own needs, but we also have to think about the software, which is really the brain or the engine that allows the robot to perform certain tasks. So one thing that we at GlobalDWS specialize in is not just, the hardware, but more importantly, the software that enables the robot to either be a telepresence robot, or it allows the robot to be, a server robot or a security robot. So it's really important to make the distinction between the hardware of the robot, which is very important, but also the software and the application that runs on the robot that allows the robot to do different functions. So the next technology we're going to focus on are digital colleagues. And a digital colleague doesn't necessarily have to be a service robot, even though there are a lot of digital colleagues that exist that are service robots. But the main purpose of a digital colleague is to assist a person, either personally or in a professional capacity, on how to manage either their incoming emails, their calls, helping them to sort their emails, and also prioritizing their emails that can be very time consuming depending on what your job might be. So some of the benefits of having a digital colleague is the flexibility, the speed, and the decision making that it can do, while you, being the human, can focus on more meaningful work. Because imagine if you're, a very successful lawyer or accountant or, a politician, and you get hundreds of emails per day. Think about how much time it takes out of your day to have to sort through each of those emails, figure out what's a priority and what isn't, and then now having to respond to each of those emails. But when you leverage the abilities of a digital colleague, the digital colleague can do all of that repetitive, mundane work that takes time out of your day, while you can focus on responding to the emails rather than sorting and prioritizing it. So if there are any professionals out there that have experienced this problem where you come into work on a Monday morning and your inbox is flooded, maybe it would be good to consider how a digital colleague can be used to eliminate a lot of that repetitive work from your daily activities. So the next technology that we're going to focus on is RPA for short. And for those of you who don't know what RPA is, it stands for Robotic Process Automation. And before I go into explaining what it is, it's really good to first establish that there are different types of automation depending on what you're trying to automate or what the task is that you're trying to automate. And RPA is one type of automation that we're seeing is becoming a bigger trend in different industries. So, when we think about what RPA is, the best way I would define it is that RPA, takes in structured data and applies a set of rules to that structured data in order to perform some sort of specific outcome or a deterministic outcome. So a really good example for that is if you are the head of a sales department or a national sales team, and you have different regional sales managers or sales directors that send you information about their region sales in a standard spreadsheet. So everything in column A has all of the revenue, for example. Everything in column B has the cost. Column C has the number of hours spent making calls. So it's structured data that these regional sales managers are sending to you. Now, your job is to take this structured data that you're receiving from all these different departments and uploading them to some sort of centralized cloud platform that will allow your CEO or your director to be able to access the information across all of the different sales regions. So, when you think about doing that, it's going to require a lot of time to copy and paste the data from the Excel spreadsheet and move it over into that cloud-based platform. When what you could do is implement some sort of RPA system that can read all of the data in each of those Excel spreadsheets, being the structured data, and then apply a set of predefined rules to that data. So one example could be transfer all of the revenue information in column A across all of the spreadsheets and move it into this area of the cloud-based platform. And the deterministic outcome that will be produced once the RPA system is done ingesting that structured data and applying the set of rules is that you would have now transferred all of the data in those different Excel spreadsheets, and they'll all now exist on that cloud-based platform. So once again, when we think about RPA and why it's so useful is because it can take in structured data, apply a set of rules that you created in order to perform some sort of deterministic outcome. So once again, if you are someone that is constantly transferring data from one format to another, it would be great to consider how RPA can be used to automate those steps so that you just have to focus on interpreting and making decisions based on the data rather than spending so much time transferring it from one place to another.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, we've seen a dramatic shift in the way people work and are expected to work. So now we have an average of about 40% of Canadians now working from home or looking to adopt hybrid work shifts between the home and public office. So now the ability for employers to enable a complete remote working experience becomes absolutely crucial in terms of corporate survival, customer satisfaction, as well as employee satisfaction. Organizations now have this unprecedented pressure on them to both promote and design a digital workplace that is aligned with these new demands and ultimately can create options that enable people to work in a style that suits them and their needs, which, as we know, for some now includes other factors such as childcare or homeschooling. At GlobalDWS, we rely heavily on Microsoft 365 Business Suite, using Teams, SharePoint, and the related productivity tools to collaborate in real time with our team that is actually located anywhere from Toronto to Beirut to Sweden. So these kinds of tools that enable us to stay connected while also prioritizing our productivity, efficiency, and physical well-being. So overall, I know businesses who have relied on legacy systems like going to a brick and mortar office 5 days a week may struggle to adapt to such a dramatic shift in the nature of place of work. But remote work tools and collaborative cloud-based business suites allow teleworkers to do their jobs from anywhere without sacrificing the communication piece. Cybersecurity is the practice of protecting systems, networks, and programs from digital attacks. So today's workplace is more susceptible to cyber attacks than ever before, which is giving rise to an onslaught of new technologies that can help protect us against phishing, ransomware, data breaches, things like this. There are three emerging or main areas in cybersecurity tech market today. The first one is biometric access. So many of us use biometric access every day without realizing. For many of us, we open our phone with our face or use a thumbprint to gain access to our computers. As biometric access becomes more developed and prevalent in our everyday lives, Ultimately, we can be certain that the amount of brute force attacks, which is an attack where a login or passwords are cracked by repeatedly and simultaneously pushing password combinations until the system is breached. With the onslaught of biometric access, we're going to see a decrease in attacks like this, and ultimately more security, more secure systems. Another emerging area in the security market is mobile-enabled or touchless access. So with everyone owning a smartphone, or pretty much everyone owning a smartphone in 2021, we've seen the market really push away from legacy systems like plastic card readers to offer something that we can all guarantee is on our person at any given time, our smartphones. Additionally, our smartphones in terms of security are far superior in that they can be locked, our data encrypted, and access restricted, often with the biometric access control that we just spoke about. The third emerging area in cybersecurity tech is secure digital certificates or badges. So digital badges can be used, and we do use them today, in email signatures or digital resumes, and even on our social media sites such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So digital credentials come in two main forms. Those are digital certificates and then the digital badges. The promise of moving away from conventional paper systems in terms of certification is that digital credentials promise automation, verification, security, and ultimately cost savings in comparison. This is an emerging technology, however, so some organizations still are in favor of using the paper systems that we had before. Ultimately, we do find ourselves at a very fascinating time in human history with respect to technology. So we also have to consider the risks and added risks that accompany that shift and that increase in our human capabilities through technology. So, as we know, as soon as we introduce another network or another device in an IoT ecosystem, for example, we have to also consider that this is another point or another link that could be breached in terms of security, could be compromised or hacked. At GlobalDWS, when we design and rethink the workplace of today, the concept of security and being on the cutting edge of today's capabilities is an essential part in what we believe to be a complete modern workplace solution or environment. So IoT is one of those buzzwords that we hear thrown around a lot in the tech world. What it means is Internet of Things. So Internet of Things means a network of physical objects. And those things are smart devices that are embedded with sensors, software, and other technologies for the purpose of connecting and exchanging data with the other devices and systems over an internet connection. GlobalDWS Internet of Things IoT consulting practice is intended to strategically support our clients in re-envisioning their digital presence, business processes, and overall impact in the business space. So our IoT consultants can offer solutions to help build smart devices that are connected to the internet and share data with other ones in the same business or building ecosystem. Our IoT consulting practice offers solutions around smart buildings, smart cities, and smart industries, which we'll go into in a minute. Our objective with our IoT consulting practice generally is to offer the best industry solution to our clients that look to us for ideas on both a small and larger scale, ultimately demonstrating how they will improve their ROI and get tangible business benefits from incorporating this emerging technology into their physical or digital workplace. At GlobalDWS, we take a holistic approach to designing smart buildings and integrating your building systems with the latest technologies to deliver the best results. A smart building is an ecosystem, essentially, of smart interconnected devices that work together and communicate through a secure internet connection to improve the usability, the design, and the functional aspect of a workplace or any space for that matter. Our building strategy is understanding the patterns related to how a space is used, when it's used, and how it is used. These are important in planning to deliver our desired employee and visitor experiences with our IoT building system.
So if we take the idea of IoT devices and smart buildings just one step further, we start to imagine things like smart communities or smart cities or smart countries. And while we don't really have any examples of that today, we can still imagine what the benefits would be if we can gather insights about different areas of our communities and being able to use that information to make better decisions in how we live our daily lives, or how laws are created, or how policies are made. And right now it's very difficult to gather that information. So one, more fictitious example of what the future of IoT devices can look like is a personal favorite of mine, but I grew up watching Star Trek, and I think about the Starship Enterprise and how there are so many different components of the ship. There are the crew quarters, there are the transporter room, the bridge, engineering. And for those of you who have seen the show or the movies, you've noticed that there are times where the captain can easily access information about different parts of the ship. So whether or not a transporter room has been used recently, or locating a specific member of the crew at any given time, or being able to check on updates regarding the warp core. So being able to have all of these devices connected to the different areas of the ship makes it easier for the captain to make better decisions when she or he has access to all of this data. So it's the same idea with smart cities or smart buildings or smart communities, being able to leverage data that was otherwise untapped or very difficult to access, and having a constant flow of information so that we can live better lives and make better decisions, not just as individuals, but as a community, or as a city, or on the largest scale, as a country or a planet. So there are a lot of benefits when you look at how these IoT devices can provide us with information that was either very, very difficult to access before, or it was just impossible without the integration of these technologies in the way we work and the way we live our lives. So that concludes our presentation for today. But before we end things off, we thought it would be good for Jessica and I just to quickly take a minute and share some of our final thoughts. So if there's anything in the presentation that we thought should be highlighted again, or if there's anything that we've learned just being in this industry that we think would be helpful for you guys to hear about, we're just going to take a quick 30 seconds or a minute maybe just to share those thoughts. So we can start with you, Jessica.
So first of all, thanks everyone for attending our first webinar episode. For me, as someone in this industry, it is really exciting to be part of the conversation with businesses and start to talk about how these emerging technologies, while they are like just that, they are emerging, how they're already starting to transform work and the workplace as we know it, and how much they will transform that in the very near future. To be part of these conversations in these early stages is a really unique challenge, but also extremely rewarding and exciting to see how we can leverage all that we've accomplished as humans in terms of technology and what's at the cutting edge to really drive efficiencies, promote better insights for businesses, and ultimately make a better world for all of us. So thanks everyone.
Yeah, no, that was very good. And for me, I think the final thought I would like to say is that we spend a lot of time speaking to organizations that have never even considered implementing any of these technologies in their organization, and not always because there isn't a need for it, but because they don't know where to start. And we understand that when it comes to emerging technologies, it's very hard to figure out how do you take that first step to even learn about the technologies. And then the next step is, okay, how do we implement it? And then the third step is actually doing it, and trial and error, or figuring out what the best way to implement these technologies in your organization. So at GlobalDWS, we really try to simplify that process on not just which technologies are out there and are best suited for your business, but also what's the best way to integrate it, to train your employees on how to use it, and then continue to innovate to improve the solution even after the deployment. So if you find yourself in that position where you're thinking about how these technologies can be used, but you're struggling on taking that first step, we invite you to send us an email or we're happy to speak with you over the phone and just introduce you to our services, what we do, and how these technologies can be used in your organization to improve the way you work. So with that said, we're going to end things off here. And once again, thank you for everyone for attending. We'd love to hear your feedback. And if there are any questions or concerns at all, please feel free to send us an email or you can give us a call. Thank you for attending.